Going to call this meeting to order. All right. Were we properly posted? All right. So we have, I believe, a 19-point agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Severson, second by Renish. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Item 4, approve minutes of the July 7th, 2023 public safety meeting. Someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion, do I have a second? Second by Ryan. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, that brings us to item number 5, Partners for Prevention, update and information. Welcome.
For me?
Is this green light on?
Oops, test.
Yep, yeah, there you are. You're on.
Test.
Yep, you're on.
Good morning. My name is Betsy Raisler. I'm the project director for our county's Drug-Free Communities grant. We're going into our 5th year, beginning at the end of September. We'll complete our 5th year of the grant, at which time in the spring we can apply for an additional 6 to 10 years. Currently, the fiscal agent for the grant is the Richland School District. And so we've been involved in many different things over the course of the past 5 years. The first year we did an assessment. And so that set the stage for what changes we were looking to work on. And just to briefly give you an overview of our approach to prevention, it's using a public health model. And you can use this analogy of a frog in a pond. You know, people in Richland County are growing up in an area. So they're growing up in the pond, and we have individual frogs that may need attention because they've developed a substance use disorder. And so you can take that frog out of the pond and treat the frog, but ultimately that frog needs to go back in the pond. So our role as a coalition is to look at the conditions in the pond so that people grow up healthy and safe. So what are the conditions in Richland County that influence substance use? That is the key question, because 9 of 10 adults who develop a substance use disorder started while they were in their teens. And oftentimes that's alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, or misuse of prescription drugs. So those are the 4 areas we focus on, and our target population are those teen years. What are teens being influenced by? What are they singing? What are they hearing? What are they listening to? What are those things around them that are influencing that early use of substances? So we've been involved in looking at community events. We've been working to assess access at retailers, at home, on private property, in terms of underage drinking. And then with tobacco use, we're looking at policies that school has. We are looking at environments where people can use tobacco. And with misuse of prescription drugs, we're looking at prescribing practices, access to prescription drugs to misuse them if people are selling or sharing medications. So a lot of education is involved in doing this initially, one-on-one conversations when things are controversial. So at this point, it's difficult to know if there's been a measurable impact on reduction of substance use. Certainly, we've seen a shift in underage drinking from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. When we started in 2017, 30-day use of alcohol was around 28%, and our last assessment, our last survey that the youth took was at 19%. So that seems to be coming down. But the parent perception and the parent involvement, parent acceptance of underage drinking has gotten worse. We've seen that from parent perception surveys that is not improving. And we know these changes take time. And so that's why as you are in conversations with people about continuing with the Drug-Free Communities Grant. They've been successful given time in many communities. And so I would encourage you to support it and to continue to work on the local conditions. This isn't about individual treatment or help for individuals. This is about looking at local conditions. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so the main reason why I wanted to have Partners for Prevention on the agenda today was that we work together with our city and county law enforcement to do what's called place of last drink. So collecting data around where people had their last drink before they were picked up for an OWI. It's an environmental strategy that many counties in Wisconsin are doing. Many states are doing as well, but it's really an interesting data collection because you can begin to see patterns. Like, is it from one house? Is it from one tavern? Where is it? And how often are law enforcement collecting that information? So I'll hand it over to Clay because he has the PowerPoint of the analysis that was done the years 20, 21, and 22. We did a collection. Do you have the PowerPoint? Bring it up. So
Did everybody have a chance to look at the PowerPoint?
I did. I thought it was interesting.
So yeah, I placed the PowerPoint in the folders yesterday. Actually they did kind of a lot more than I was even expecting with the data, as far as graphing and mapping it for the county. And I mean, there's some trends. I think looking at this from a law enforcement standpoint, we had a lot of things confirmed that we probably already had suspicions of. I mean, we kind of knew where we were getting people from, where they're coming from. Some by their own admittance and some just we knew. And obviously not everybody admits to where they last drank when we encounter them anyway. So like Betsy was saying, some of that data is missing from our reports.
Do you have any, I was looking at the question on one of the pages about the 2021 stops being so many more stops in 21 than 20 and 22. Any thought, were we doing some kind of more staffing levels were better?
So I would say in 20, going through
COVID.
the last half of 2020, we turned over almost half of our patrol staff.
Right.
So that was a rough year staffing wise, rougher than what we've been having normally. And so you couple that with COVID, I mean, the marching orders at the peak or at the beginning of COVID was, let's go reactive. Let's not go out of our way to have, community encounters where we could get sick or get somebody else sick or bring it into the jail. I mean, everything was kind of pushed down to bare necessity. I think some of that started to wear off in 2021. We also had some of our new hires were rather aggressive in OWI enforcement. And if you just look at our OWI numbers, I mean, and our citation numbers, there's a spike. Not just OWIs, but general traffic enforcement. There's a spike in 2021, and that I think it had dipped down a little bit since 2021, but not a lot, and has stayed pretty even since. So, yeah. Is there any other questions about the data?
Well, my question was, what do we think we will do with the data, if anything?
This is first is creating awareness around it,
Mhm.
having the sheriff present it, bring it to you all, creating awareness. That is the other piece would be if the sheriff would want to encourage this as a practice, that they would definitely collect every time. But like he said, not all of them are coherent enough to be able to give accurate data.
And are they required to answer that question?
No.
Right?
No, and
It'd be voluntary.
that's the other half of it is
They could just say, I'm not going to tell you.
if it's asked pre-arrest and they admit it, great, you can throw it in your report, but post-arrest, if if they say, I don't want to talk, that is
Yeah,
their
they
right
can
to not
talk,
talk.
right.
So, yeah.
And they lie.
And they lie. Yeah.
So
I mean, what's the most common lie in an OWI? How many have I had to drink? 2. Yeah. So,
Right.
but yeah, if you look at the data, over half the data, or over half of our contacts, we don't have a last place of drink. 23% is at a licensed establishment. 8% was other, 4% at an event, 12% at a friend or family's house, 6% they were drinking at home, and 1% there just it was a recreational type thing. So, and another thing, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't include drug impaired driving in the data. This is
No,
alcohol.
those that were, I think those were also put in a column. We have that data, but it's not in this report. It's alcohol focused. And so the idea is to see patterns, and in communities where there's a larger population, you can begin, there are taverns that have lost their license because of overservice, perpetual
Repeatedly,
overservice, because that could be tied back to a particular location. In our case, there are a couple that surface, but it's not an exorbitant amount, a number of times. I don't know if you could call it a pattern or not, but
Yeah.
it's something to be aware of, and that's the first step. And then, is it valuable enough for you all to continue collecting it? That's another question.
So why don't you, because there's several new members of this committee since you were last here.
Yeah.
Do you want to give just a brief overview of the other collaborations that we've been doing with you, which would be them going to the people who sell alcohol and seeing if they'll sell to underage, and just briefly describe the other actions that we've collaborated with this committee?
Sure. And I think I briefly touched on the fact that the role of our coalition, which is diversely represented by youth, parents, media, law enforcement's big sector there, clergy, businesses, and civic organizations. So we have lots of different perspectives coming to the table to figure out what's going on in the Richland County pond. So that role of the coalition is to change the pond. So one of the things that came to the surface was that youth are accessing alcohol at convenience stores, taverns, bars in Richland County, that it's fairly easy to access at those locations. So our strategy would be to partner with law enforcement to implement an evidence-based strategy called alcohol age compliance checks. Unfortunately, in Wisconsin, they're not paid for, so we're currently using grant funds to fund the cost of the youth decoys, the coordination. Fortunately, law enforcement is doing their part to match our efforts by supplying us with law enforcement to do these operations. Would you like to know a little bit how they're done, or is that okay? So the recommendation is that they're done twice a year, biannually, that as many as the licensed liquor establishments could be checked in a year. We do them twice a year. We typically have 4 teams that go north, south, east, and west, trying to do them simultaneously so you don't create that phone tree. Although the phone tree is, we know that it happens, but it's still heightening awareness around what we're trying to do. By doing them, even though there may be calling ahead, oh, they're doing them. Well, why do you suppose they're doing them? Because we're trying to prevent our county from having a substance use problem. How many times are there law enforcement deal with drug cases? This is the primary prevention of them happens by checking out the pond. So the operation north, south, east, west consists of 4 individuals, 2 youth decoys, an adult chaperone who collects the data, and a law enforcement officer. They ride in the same vehicle. some cases it's an unmarked law enforcement vehicle. They'll go to the establishment and park, and the two youth will go in, and they'll try to purchase. We're not trying to trick any of these businesses at all. These are obviously youthful looking young people who present their IDs. And as you know, the ID is vertical, and up in the left-hand upper side of the ID, it says U21 in red. So there really is no reason why they should be sold to. It's very obvious, present their ID. And if they're sold, then sold to, they sent a text message to the officer, and the officer comes in and the youth leave, and then the officer talks to the tavern, whoever sold to them, and finishes out that violation, either by giving them a ticket. So, and then if they aren't sold to, the officer comes in and says, congratulations, thank you. So that's all there is to it. And they keep moving along. In one evening, we've reached around, I'd say between 30 and 40 licensees at one time. Any other questions?
You make sure, because of, we don't have the vision of the preferential treatment, do you try and make sure you hit every establishment every time, or at least all of them once a year? So somebody can't say, hey, you're letting these guys slide?
We try as best as we can to reach all of them. Sometimes they're closed at the time. So when Weggy Winery was Weggy Winery, they weren't open at the time we did an operation, the family restaurant. There's times when we just can't get to all of them. We also do send out a warning letter once a year with materials. We give them signage for their customers and for their employees to have behind the bar, indicating, giving them a picture of the license and encouraging them to check all IDs. No, I wouldn't say. Would you say we give anyone preferential treatment?
No, and I think you hit it. There are times you just can't hit everyone in a night. We try and spread it out. And usually that I see the ones that we miss, it's because, so I get the data after they do it, let's say a week after they do it, they have all the data compiled, they send it to me, and I see the pass fail rate. And the data is usually broken down to pass fail, not checked, which not checked is usually not a lot of them, or not open. So they weren't open at the time of the check. So yeah, I think we're trying to spread around to make sure we get everybody. Our last check we had a 100% compliance with every establishment we checked. So, but seems to be working.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because in 2020 was the first time we had this collaboration, and only 43% of them passed. And then it went from 43 to 58, 80, 77, 87, and 100% in March. So I think as you look at changing the pond, this isn't necessarily a popular strategy, but if people ask the question why we're doing them, and we tie it to the issue of the burden of substance use in the county, that's why we're doing them.
Right.
Yep.
And that's why this committee was supportive. We actually did a resolution in support of Partners for Prevention and the programs that they do. So I don't remember when exactly. Was it 2020 when we did that?
2020 November of 2020 was the first round.
Okay, yeah.
And then twice a year since then. But,
So,
we ultimately would like to sustain this strategy. So it'd be part of the operation of the county that we do these twice a year.
right. All right, does anyone have any other questions? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Good morning. Thank you, first of all, Betsy, for all the work. It's a lot of effort going into this by the group. How do you, what messaging do you use? I just think about you talking about the pond. And I can think of somebody that I know really well that alcoholism with their child has had a huge impact. And, are there some success stories? Are there individuals that have kind of come out of this as maybe a youth that was struggling, finished, came out better, that could partner up with myself as a EMS provider, the sheriff as a law enforcement provider, somebody from the judge's office, from the hospital, that you could get that out in like a small video so that maybe be a little more impactful, because it doesn't, people will tend to ignore a message unless it hits their home. And then when it hits their home, then it becomes real. And when it becomes real, then you drive some passion. And when you get some passion going, it just kind of follows through. So I don't know if you've done it. If you have, then that's on me for not being, in tune enough with what you've done, but just an idea.
Yeah, stories are very powerful. You asked about the messaging. I think the messaging just really, in a nutshell, 9 of 10 adults who develop a substance use disorders started using alcohol in their teens. And so that piece about brain development has been really at the forefront. And our most recent campaign, you may see the billboard on Highway 14. Thank you for keeping our youth alcohol free. We still have a culture that does not agree with that message. In fact, one of the we have a youth coalition that worked in 3 of Denny Jax's stores. And we're trying to refresh that. We put the stickers on the products and on the refrigerators.
Cases, yeah.
We took bottle hangers and put them over on the bottles, but we get this pushback from the distributors. And we know why, because 25% of their market, it's estimated, 25% of their market is underage drinking. And so we have, in working with Denny Jax, we need him, this is like an evolving strategy, him to, help us with the distributor side, because once that product's in their store, I think legally it's Denny Jax's product, so we're getting pushback on some of the messaging, but stories, you're right, are powerful. Do we have a story about an individual impacted? No, because it's in public health approach, changing the pond. The only stories we would have would be, gosh, we were able to implement some strategies at community events which restricted alcohol. It would be more like that, but maybe those could be used as a way for increasing capacity in the county to work on it. That would be another way.
I'm just curious if you couldn't put a public safety official or somebody that's involved, a face in a video that you could post everywhere and anywhere, that maybe it's a story from us that have to deal with the aftermath. Maybe it's a story from the court, maybe it's a story from the district attorney, maybe it's a story from a deputy or an EMT that went to the scene and they stand off at the side and say, this didn't have to be. I mean, it only takes one broken teenage body at a car accident to stick with you for the rest of your life. And you sometimes wish that you could just take individuals who want to push back and say, look at that. And it's not to be morbid or cruel. It's just the reality is it's just destructive, and it's unnecessary destruction. So I don't know. I'm just wondering if your grant fund wouldn't do that. It doesn't have to be anything big, but like a
Yes, that's
60-second
use of the grant funds. In fact,
Betsy, can I say something?
Julie. So Julie's on our coalition. So yes.
I'm Julie Prouty. I'm the Alcohol Work Chair Group, and I love that idea. I think the biggest thing that I've learned about the attitudes around alcohol in Richland County, and it's not just Richland County, it's that it was okay for me. Why do anything different now? We've gone to townships, we've talked to committees, and we've heard many stories about, well, I went out hunting with a 5th of peppermint schnapps in my pocket and I was okay. Well, that's not a success story. That's evidence that what we're doing needs to change. And that's the biggest issue. And again, I was a superintendent at Ithaca for many years, recently retired, and I don't know how to change the attitude of the parents where, well, it was okay when I was a kid. So I keep bringing up bicycle helmets and seatbelts. You know, when my parents were younger, they never wore a seatbelt. Well, now they're required. Why? Because the more we learn, the better we do. And the statistic of 9 out of 10 people that developed a use disorder started with alcohol. That's huge. We didn't know that 25, 50 years ago. So yeah, Clay's very, very helpful. Darren, thank you. Those are really good examples. We're always looking for more help on the committees. If nothing else, just to point out things that we could be doing that we don't know that we're not doing.
Yeah, there's just a lot of room for improvement. Community events are, you know, they should be held to the same standard as taverns, you know, as far as selling.
Yeah.
It's,
Speaking of community events, Tuesday night was wild. I mean, there was a lot of people there,
yeah,
a lot. There was no parking at all.
no alcohol.
And no alcohol, no parking. I had to get really creative with finding a spot where I could park, and because I got there a little late. But, anyways, yeah, thanks for all you do. I mean,
Oh,
appreciate it.
it's a team effort. Clay is pulling his weight, let me tell you, and Aaron and the city, they're involved. You know, we could use more parents. I think we could use more parents. Let me just say one more thing for you all. So I work with 2 districts, and Julie's here. She was with Ithaca. It was fantastic that the Ithaca Bulldogs won that state championship. But how was it celebrated? You know, we have a community that's aware, you know. So that's going to take a lot of people to help change that. It's not enough. Yeah.
I don't know that you can always necessarily. I think the idea of investing this time and energy and messaging and culture change in when they're at the most vulnerable will yield the most results. But those results are going to take 8, 10, 12 years to see that culture change. I remember in the command post during the Star Spangled Celebration talking to Chief Anier at the time, and he had said that it can take up to 8 years to really see the fruits of what you're working at when you're talking about changing a culture. So you're in how many years now with this?
We're finishing up our 4th. At
Going
the
in
end of
5.
September, we got 5, but now when we apply in the spring, this is a competitive application again.
Sure.
The first time we applied, only 30% were awarded of thousands of applications. So we'll be in that same pool again. But we need to demonstrate that the community's behind us. We need to be able to talk about that, say, look, we've got law enforcement helping. So that will push us through the next, but yeah, 10 years isn't enough either, but
Right.
at least we're focused on what we're trying to change. Previously, people would say, oh, we need scare tactics. We need things for kids to do. It just distracts from the real issue, the real problem. That's not a solution. The solution is to look at the risk factor and strategize around that comprehensively, from information to policy, the science of prevention, which I could talk for hours. But thank you for letting me be here. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Clay and Aaron and all of you for supporting it. And if you wouldn't mind, by a show of hands, would any of you be willing to be in a video to share your testimony? Darren? Clay? Okay, we could get Ben from Nova Video on that, right, Julie? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. All right, that brings us to coroner updates. Did we have any updates, Clay?
Uh,
I didn't
last
see any in
time
our
I looked,
folder.
let's see. No, I do have one.
Okay.
So, update for June and July. 11 calls in June, 11 calls in July, 76 cases for the year. We were at 79 at this time last year. Going back 10 years, we were at 67 cases at this time in 2013. Cause of death in cases from June and July, heart-related 11, cancer 9, and other illness 2. We had no accidents, suicides, or overdoses in June and July. I'm still hoping to find a couple more staff for our office.
All right. So that brings us to item 7, Circuit Court Judge updates and comments. Okay.
Good morning. Just a few things briefly. We are continuing the important work of the circuit court. We're continuing to catch up. I think we're starting to hit our stride now in terms of all of us understanding how things need to be scheduled and getting them scheduled in a timely way, clearing out the backlog, and being able to find hearing dates not too far in the future for things. We continue to find little things. Attorney Harper and I just sat down and talked about book and release initial appearances. So when somebody is arrested in the jail and is not held for a bail hearing, they're given an initial appearance date. And we realize we have to tweak that a little bit and add a few more so that they don't end up too far out. So the jailers in the jail at the time that they are released or give a particular person a date to come back to court. So those are all things that have to be continually looked at, but I'm confident we can get initial appearance dates that are perfectly appropriate. We decided, at a book and release, somebody should get an initial appearance date about 3 weeks out. That gives the sheriff's department enough time to get the reports to the DA's office. The DA's office has enough time to create the doc or decide how they're going to charge it and issue a criminal complaint. So it's great. That's a great feeling. It's important for everybody to remember that there's a lot of people involved in that, and having competent, experienced staff is very important, both in Jenny's office and in the clerk of courts, of course, in the DA's office as well. It has to be a well-oiled machine. And so we're grateful to have enough staff, and we're grateful to have experienced staff that are doing that. We've continued to have the courthouse security committee meetings. We had one just this week, I believe. And that, in my opinion, is a really great committee in that we talk about things that are super important to the circuit court and people that work in this particular building. After the meeting, I always get a little bit feedback like, yeah, everything that happened in the committee meeting was great. But I've been hearing this for 20 years, that we need this change X, Y, Z. And we said this 20 years ago. And then, every few years it comes back around, and the issue is always, well, we really need this, but where's the money? Or where's the whatever to be able to do it? So even though the conversations are great and I think right on point, we have to find a way to get out of that nightmarish loop of, well, we talk about it, we know what we need, but we can't accomplish it.
I would say one significant difference this time, though, is that we're actually putting them into our capital plan, which we've never had capital planning before. So the possibility of things actually getting done is changing. We already this year, you have stuff in the 2024 capital improvement the camera. So we are making progress this time. I feel like I don't disagree with I know these are conversations that have been happening for a very long time, but at least this time we're getting them into the planning cycle so that we can finance them, because that's always the hindering factor, of course, is how do we pay for it? Yeah. At least we're baby steps. It's better than going backwards.
So we've been trying to look at things through a couple of different lenses. One would be short-term goals, things that we think we can accomplish pretty quickly, and long-term goals. Long-term goals, of course, are what do we need to do to update our current facility? But then the new, certainly more exciting conversation around the idea of what is the county going to do with the campus properties? And the fact that we need a new jail. If we need a new jail, do we also need kind of, in addition to that, what should we be looking at in terms of just overall government property improvements? So we appreciate the opportunity to participate in that conversation. We've been able to meet now with Candace Pash, the new county administrator, and been able to start having some of those conversations with her. So we hope to have meaningful conversations and have good discussions around, you know, do we do something new? And if we don't do something new and we have to update, realistically, what does that look like? Because there's still a lot that needs to happen with regard to courthouse security. And some of it's very basic, but it's extremely expensive. And it's because we are not in a modern facility that with issues that were never contemplated. I mean, simple things like, for example, you know, by some miracle, we managed to have sort of a one entrance or a two entrance policy in this building where there's only one or two ways to get in, but really sort of one way to get in. And that addresses a lot of security concerns. There's also a ton of doors, though, that go out. And that's great, and that's important because of the fire hazards that would be created if you didn't have that. But from a security standpoint, those doors that let people out could be propped open if somebody had a strategy to get in. And there's no way to fix that without some incredible expense. And one of the best ways to fix that would be to create a buzzer system whereby if the door was open and it was propped open, a buzzer would go off. Well, we had this conversation. Yeah, that's great, but there's no wiring or some way to create that buzzing to alert the important people who could react to that or at least go and figure out what's going on. I mean, that's one of many issues that we have that need to be talked about. One of the things we talked about in our security meeting, and you are all welcome to come when we have those, the courthouse security meeting, is there are a number of, or at least one or two free evaluations that can be done. There's a U.S. Marshal that will come in and do an evaluation of our courthouse with regard to security concerns. I believe there's somebody on the state level as well. We have some neighboring counties. Iowa County several years ago, the last 7 or 8 years, they did major renovations with an eye toward and primarily towards security issues. And so we're trying to arrange for them to come and just give us some thoughts as to, they renovated a very old courthouse. They wanted to try to preserve some of its character, and they did some remarkable things that I could never have imagined prior to them doing. And when I heard about it before I saw it, I was a little like, oh, that doesn't sound like it's going to work very well. But it actually did work quite well. So I appreciate Betsy coming. She's just got a really cool way of her energy and her ability to take a big problem and sort of piece it out and say, we're going to look at it this way. I thought, you know, we need to do that maybe with some of the issues that we have here in the courthouse, some of those things. But yeah, so we talk about personnel issues. So the Sheriff's Department is working very hard to make sure that we have court security, an officer. I mean, there's problems with funding that is ongoing, of course, and it's just essential. But not only that, but finding people who are willing to serve as courtroom security. I don't know why people aren't clamoring to do that, because we're just a whole lot of fun up there. But of course, we need somebody continuously in the courtroom from the time we start until the time we finish. But we also need somebody when there's a second courtroom going. And sometimes that's a visiting judge. We do often have visiting judges, but sometimes it's the court commissioner that's conducting hearings in there. And honestly, sometimes those are the most volatile and perilous type of hearings, because they're often folks who are asking for a temporary hearing in a divorce. So that's right at the beginning of a divorce process. They're often unrepresented, and there's a lot of really raw and high emotions. And honestly, that's the time we hear the most yelling. That's the time, and I have a lot of concerns for our court commissioner and making sure that particular forum is covered by security. And then there's the issue of if we have somebody that needs to come up from the jail, and we have the court security officer go down and get that person from the jail, from the period of time that they leave the courtroom to go down and get the person and come back up, courtroom is completely unmonitored by a security official. So those are very real issues that we have. Those are personnel issues, and it's really, honestly, not acceptable to not have somebody in the courtroom, full-time court security officer, because of the issues that are the potential issues, but, you know, the issues that have arisen in other counties throughout the state. We're just asking for something terrible to happen if we don't make that a priority. We need to look at the facilities. We need to look at locks. You know, we talk a lot about key fobs, you know, how important key fobs are. But again, we have this old aging facility. We don't have the infrastructure to have key fobs without it being extremely expensive. And so we have a lot of keys. We had a big discussion at our meeting about how, you know, we have no ability to track these keys. We're trying to now, but in the past, we don't know where all the keys are, and to rekey everything is extremely expensive. Key fobs are a common sense, modern solution to a huge problem. But in this aging facility, it's a big expense and very, very difficult. So there's things like that. There's things like we need to have one access point into the courtroom. Well, right now we have two, because it's you come in one way from the elevator, and in order to get to the other courtroom, you have to go through the big courtroom. Well, that's because we have maybe the small courtroom in the wrong place. We had it in a different place, we could make the courtroom have one access point where people could be wanded or go through a metal detector in order to get in there. But to move that second courtroom and put it somewhere else, it would require an astronomical effort and a lot of expense, and somebody who can spearhead it and do it. So I say all this to say, I know this is stuff that keeps getting talked about, but it needs to continue to be talked about, and particularly in light of what are we going to do moving forward, and to realize that what is going on there is not okay. It's not okay, some of what we've got going on in the courtroom. I mean, we still have a huge bat problem. We see evidence of bats every day, and we're ashamed to say it almost, but we see bat dung on the chairs, which means they have visited in the nighttime. Well, that might be okay, because somebody could maybe go through and wipe it out, but we see them during hearings too. And so they're flying around, and we have to stop a hearing and wait. And Randy's got the most ingenious little vacuum that'll go up in the lighting fixtures and maybe get them out there if they're not flying around. But, you know, what do we do? What do we do about the bat problem? Well, I think a permanent solution to that, again, would require lots and lots of money. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on there. I am very pleased to say that we are making progress on some of the sound issues. I think I mentioned this last time. There's been I have a speaker now at the bench so I can hear what's going on. We have now arrangements have been made, and thank you so much to MIS for working on this to have more microphones installed in the large courtroom.
On the 21st, they
On-
go in.
On the 21st. So that's been something that's been a long time in coming and very needed. It's more than just installing some microphones. It requires wiring into the big system, which means going through the floor. So we're on the verge of that. As Melissa said, we've got now some money in the capital improvement project, and we're looking at the Zoom capabilities in the small courtroom, which are frankly, after COVID, are essential and very needed, along with some speakers. There's absolutely no speakers or amplification in the small courtroom, which would be great if it were a sound-friendly room, but it is not. There are two very noisy radiators. So when the radiator's on, either for heating or for cooling, you can't hear very much, and everybody, it's just a bad scenario. So we're excited that there's a potential for change there. We are in the short term looking at putting up new signs. We talked about that at our meeting as to what is and is not allowed in the courtroom. We're looking at putting signs on both sides of the doors there and on the outside of the small courtroom, as well as getting some signage for the doors coming into the building. Those signs we have are very old and they're outdated, and we need to update those. So we talked about where that money would come from, and we thought it would come out of Randy's budget, but in speaking with Randy yesterday, he's like, I don't have money in my budget for that. So we're going to have to once again circle around and figure out where we're going to get money for signs. But I assume we can hopefully sort that out. That's about all I have. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Even the simplest sign thing brings up, I think, what's been a long-standing problem, and that is communication in the fact that planning ahead. So when you guys see these things, you know, you need to get with Randy ahead of the budget time so that he can put it in. I know it's a conglomerate here that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, but I can see how that falls through the cracks. So we need to work on communication between the departments to make sure that it's in somebody's budget instead of in retrospect or after the fact, pointing fingers, trying to figure out, because we all see the need, but we have to know ahead of time. I don't have an answer for the problem other than communication.
Right.
But then we, as supervisors, need to acknowledge that we're asking for an increase in one line item when we gotta tell them to cut their budget or keep it straight, so. Kind of twofold, we tell them, hey, do that, but then we say, no, you can't do that.
But at least we know, and then the fault falls back on us. If we're the ones that say no, then they don't need to point fingers at any of you. They need to point the fingers at us. We're the ones that said no, so.
But just remember, though, that we do have to balance a budget, and
Yes, that's
cuts
what I
have to be
mean.
made somewhere, and that's how it happens. That's exactly how it happens. So I don't know how to fix that other than someone give us $1 billion, but yeah, I mean, this is the vicious cycle. It's this vicious cycle we've been stuck in for so many years. And the only saving grace that we've had these last few years is our intent with the $1,050,000 that we've done in short-term borrowing to specifically address capital improvements, which all of these things we've been talking about really fall under. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just not pleasant. Anyway. All right, anything else from any other questions? All right, that brings us to the clerk of court.
Good morning. Very good report from the judge, coverage of the court security issues. for a long time, we hadn't been having the court security meetings. Judge Sharp had started out with them, and you all know, I mean, many years in the system and many years of talking about the same things, and, you know, this is not then, but yeah, so I think we all needed to take a break from that, because nothing was happening and we were stuck in that spinning cycle. And now that we have a new type of finance structure in the county and an administrative lead that helps all of us out, I think, and gives a better direction to the county. So it's given us kind of a renewed spirit on that too, because there's hope on some of these issues. So that's kind of why it's kind of like for years, we've felt like we had no voice or we'd lost our voice. And this, the new structure has kind of given us that back. So if it seems like we're like, and this, and this, and this, it's because we're excited that, because they've been bottled up for a long time. It's not because they're new topics. It's because we finally have the platform to be able to talk about them again. So, and with the capital project, you know, we did sit down with, we sat down with John. That was before Candace was on board, and he did help with mapping things out, but kind of like, you know, was kind of trying to rein in that excitement of we need to get all of these things done. He's like, all right, let's get some of these things done this year, some of these things done the next year. So each year we'll, you know, we have this continuing list, and what we don't get done this year, we will put on. So, yeah, that's really good. Last month at the time of this meeting, I was attending the National Court Managers Conference as the delegate for Wisconsin, as the president of the Clerk of Court Association. And that was a really cool experience that I was thankful to have, funded by the association and by myself. County didn't pay for a dollar of any of it, but I think that I wish that years ago I would have realized the value and would have maybe even incorporated into my budget at least the membership to be part of an organization like that, which now I'm paying to be a member myself. But there are tools that we have access to as part of that, and the conference was focused on a lot about access to the courts and really what that means. And that's something that's always been kind of like near and dear to me, about how we offer this service to all residents of the county. And they put into words what we have tried to do for so long, particularly in the area of, for folks with limited proficiencies. That might be limited English proficiencies, but it might also be, in a larger way that it would apply, would be just limited educational backgrounds. And so things like looking at the forms that are used in the state of Wisconsin and all the verbiage on everything, including those that are for people who don't have an attorney, which is what most of what civil small claims and family law is in Wisconsin. And so how do we in the state of Wisconsin, and these forms are used in all 72 counties, including the forms that we use here, make them so that when people look at them, they fill them out correctly, so that we're not having hearings that we have to reset because the court says this is not how you would present this, and you can do this without an attorney in the state of Wisconsin, but you still have to know how to do it. Well, then we need to make it more straightforward for people. And so instead of forms being written at a 8th grade reading level, we need to take them down to a 5th grade reading level. We need to because these forms are filled with legalese. I had a couple yesterday that I'm sure were at least graduates of high school and probably beyond, that said, these are this, so like this word here, what does that mean? Oh, it's that. Well, of course. So like terms that they've heard their entire life. For example, maintenance on a family form. What does that mean? When they're filling out a petition for divorce, what's maintenance mean? Is that alimony? I'm like, yes, that's exactly, but it doesn't say that on the form, doesn't say that anywhere on the form. They would not know that. They have children. So what's the difference between placement and custody? I thought custody, I thought that was everything. I thought that's when, when he has a child or when I have the child, I'm like, no, that's placement is the legal word for visitation, basically, where the child is placed, almost like the child is a piece of property in the law. Placement. Child is placed here at this time, placed here. Custody is who makes decisions over the child. And so these are very important things for people to understand, but they're not laid out in a way that it's easy to understand. So just like stepping back, taking a fresh look at that, and then also how the language on forms like notices of hearing, how they affect the efficiency of court, how fast cases get from beginning to end. Well, these guys that are in criminal court, Jennifer, Lisa, they know that when people don't show up for their hearings, that results in a warrant and then delayed justice. So we have to wait till they get picked up. And some people intentionally blow off their court dates. A form's not going to change that. Some people have a lot of court dates going on in a lot of counties and a lot of different things, and they do get confused. Or they think, well, my attorney said that they could appear for me. They don't understand it's not for every specific hearing. And so there were examples of states that have changed their forms and how things appear so that it's simpler, straightforward, and it has increased their attendance, people's attendance at court. It's gotten rid of some of that need for warrants. Places that have changed their traffic citations and looking at those and saying, well, who are these citations, how they're laid out? Anybody that's ever got a speeding ticket, seatbelt ticket, anything, if you can picture what that form looked like, it's extremely busy. And one place on it has your appearance date if you want to fight the ticket. And then there's a whole lot of other stuff in there. It's laid out for the agency's use and for the DOT's use. It's not defendant or user friendly for the person who got the ticket. So how we look at those things to make it better for all of us that are involved in the system. So it was good. After 16 years in the system, it gave me fresh eyes.
I have a question. Are we allowed to make changes to those forms, or are those state level forms?
They're state level forms,
So it
all
has
of
to
those.
change at the state level.
Yes, and so part of the discussion then was how would we, where would be a good starting point for that? And we do have a records management committee at the state level that works with the Director of State Courts Office in Wisconsin Court Operations. And some states have brought in consultants who kind of like a PR consultant if you're doing a communications, you're trying to change the communications of your organization. Well, in this, if you're trying to change your forms and how the communication is on them, they've brought in consulting firms that help you get down to the point of, okay, does this read well for a person who, that doesn't have a law degree? And look, because we're all used to looking at it. We are all used to it. And that's something that we've known in our office, and we have to remind ourselves, we know how to do this stuff. So when people ask for help, we have to be careful. We can't give them legal advice because we're not attorneys, but they're just asking most of the time for procedural help. And a lot of times they're just asking for, what does this mean? And so if the state could lay that out in an easier fashion, it would provide more efficiency for the court, because we are all trying to do more with less time, less people, less money. And so something as simple as the words on a piece of paper, the impact that can have. So That was pretty cool, kind of a revelation. And then I had my budget meeting yesterday with Candace and John. And that was such a pleasant experience. I just got to tell y'all, that it just, they said that they are going to put all their numbers together and present them to the board in a more palatable fashion this year. And I'm excited about that.
Fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it
Come
just.
to me and say, yeah, we have enough money to do all of this.
Right, but just that they looked at my numbers. I did put in increases for, you guys know, I'm a budget realist. And so I put in the increases according to the trends for attorney fees, which are the largest item in my budget. Now it is larger, I believe, than staff salaries. And that's just based off the trends of where the spending is, and that's nothing that any of us can do anything about. But we have to pay it. And so those guys looked at my budget and said, looks like you have an increase here and it's for attorney fees. And it looks like it's according to what the expenditures have been for attorney fees over the last few years. Makes sense. That was pretty much the critique of yeah, it makes sense. And it was nice to hear on the other side of the aisle, just that even if they come back and say, Stacy, cut your budget by 50 grand. Okay, I'll do it. And guess where I'm going to take it out of? Attorney fees, because I don't have anywhere else that's large enough to take it out of. And I'll do that, and I will call it a budget fiction, as I have told you before. But at least there was that recognition of that's what, I would like to put my health insurance back in. I do have health insurance coverage through my husband now. But if I get hit by a truck, the next person who's a clerk of court, they're probably going to want health insurance. And that's going to make our budget go over. So any rate, I think that we have cut to where we can't cut anymore. And when the people that are providing the services they have to provide to the people that go through the court are being paid more than staff, but we can't do anything about it because they need to be paid. Staff, we also need to have staff. I don't really know what you got left, but at least that acknowledgement that we have to strive to try to keep that in there. I appreciated that. So.
Sounds good. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, not really. I guess what you're going on with the health insurance, this is just for everybody in the county. Like, yeah, I know, like, you don't budget for it because you have that with your husband, but at some point your husband might not have that health insurance and you might have to have it. So you need to budget for it. Every department head just needs to put in the health insurance for everything.
That's what I had to cut, Carrie, in order to not cut staff a few years ago. And so now to put that back into my budget, I cannot, because I was told to hold my budget and I'm having to increase for the things that are realistic. So I realistically know right now I'm on my husband's insurance, but I realistically know that my budget is blown to hell on attorney fees. So I have to put the money where the expense is. Yeah, I would like to put that extra back in there. Maybe in subsequent years, I'll be able to, if we can edge up that, if I can have enough budget so that I don't have to worry about going over in attorney fees, then the next step would be restoring, we have 3 staff, so restoring 3 health insurance, premiums in there for all the staff. That would be good, but I'm not going to ask my people to cut their insurance, and I can't do without 2 full-time people. So yeah, I 120% agree.
All right, thank you. So that brings us to probate.
So just to piggyback on some of what the judge said and what Stacy said, I feel like you as county board supervisors understand our committee. I mean, I really do. I feel like we've communicated, you've invested time learning about this. So I guess the one thing I'm going to ask of you is to try and communicate to the other county board supervisors, because I feel like there is a loss from what you understand at this committee to other people. So they could, because they listen to their committees and they feel like that's what's important. But of course, you know, I'm passionate about this committee and this group of people. And so I have, you know, firsthand seen Stacy and Darren and all of us, I feel like in this room, make personal sacrifices for our budgets, for this county. We put in extra time, extra work. So I feel like this group of people right here in this room understand. I mean, I really do. That you've heard the line items, you've heard the cuts for years. We've gone to referendum. You've heard me argue for positions in my, you know, in a two-person office. So, but I feel like because they're in the evenings and I have a lot of family obligations, that I haven't been able to go to the full county board. So I feel like there's a loss there that everyone doesn't really understand. So everything that's been said, you know, everything we need from cameras and more court security. I mean, I could go on and I could, you know, reiterate what's been said, but I feel like you get it. Everywhere from the cameras to the signage, to the sheriff's department, to emergency government. These are needs that this county is mandated to have. So but we need to communicate to all of the county board supervisors that when they're voting on things, to really consider the discrepancies from one department to another, and to hold each other accountable, and to hold other department heads accountable. And then when they request things from you as county board supervisors, that they have the integrity and are too looking out for what is in the best interest of Richland County. And we need to learn from our past. I don't know how, you know, everything from what Ken said, Carrie said, Melissa, I've seen the work you've done, but we need to not forget where we were. Again, we were at referendum not very long ago. We need to learn from that.
Interestingly, I spoke with Candace after the public safety meeting, and she had not been told about the referendum report, and so had not read it. And so she has now been digging into it a lot, but I was shocked that that hadn't been mentioned to her before I met with her. Because I think, I said, you need to look at where we were last year before we, you know, because we seem to be thinking like we're still not in trouble, but we still have a lot of issues we're facing with our budget. So, because there was a lot of work put into that, and there's a lot of very good information into there about exactly where we are and how we can get out of this. If we toe the line and really follow through on what we talked about last year. So
I think that we, as a county, when we did that report, changed the state's thinking.
I think we did.
We were the spearhead for that. That was our work.
The shared
I
revenue,
guarantee
just
it.
you mean the shared revenue discussion especially?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it went from not even having a discussion about it, and all of a sudden now here we're getting $800,000. The whole,
The
not
whole
just
thing's
us,
being
but like the whole state,
state.
whole local governments are getting that.
They do.
It's because they opened their eyes up, because we actually provided them with factual
Data.
information.
Data is always very helpful in that conversation. So, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you're saying. And I do think there is, that's part of why we wanted the county administrator. Because when you have county board members who are very invested in committees, which, I mean, when you're sitting in a room listening to you guys talk about your needs, we are very passionate. We do understand what you need, but every committee is doing the same, and every committee is hearing from their department heads about what is critical and absolutely, you know, they cannot do without. So having a county administrator that has the big picture, I think, is really how we're going to make our way forward and make solid decisions based on actual needs, not, and that wants and needs are a little hard to separate sometimes. And I'm not saying that the things you're talking about aren't critical, because security, obviously, I mean, all it takes is one crazy person walking in here and doing something awful, and then we are, you know, your lives are literally, and we understand that. And so I think we need that. That's why I like the capital plan, because it does prioritize those kind of issues. And it takes it away from the tax levy and well, not the tax levy, but it takes it away from the tax levy for operational and puts it on the debt service. But so we have a lot of work to do. I hope that we can continue. I feel like we've made progress and that we're doing a much better job of assessing overall needs and addressing them. But we have a long way to go, for sure. So keep talking about it. Keep bringing it up. I mean, if we don't talk about it, then it for sure is never going to happen. If it doesn't get on, on somebody's radar, then it's never going to happen. So you have to keep talking about it, even if the board completely turns over. Have to keep talking about. Yep. Whole new people. Yep. And that's every 2 years. Right. Every 2 years, you can have a completely different committee looking at you.
Different committee, but different supervisors and different ideas, because everybody runs for, they really have an agenda.
Right. You have to
So
have a reason for
we may
running.
have one thing, we're going good, but now this next county board that comes in, they're like, we want to cut taxes, and boy, they're gonna stick it to it. You can't really,
I know.
that's where the administrator, I think, is helpful. But
Very helpful. Keeping a more of an even keel.
And to have that record of data in one location that stays the same. So now we have an administrator.
Institutional
administrative-
knowledge. Yep.
Yeah, administrator office that can keep it. I've always said it's all the pieces of the puzzle laid out on the one table.
Instead of separate silos of puzzles.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's better.
So anything else you guys would like to add before we move on?
So just a couple quick things. So I just wanted to also bring to your attention that with the loss of Beverly Burns, to again reiterate what Stacy was saying, we no longer really have a free legal clinic. We don't. She was the spearhead. She was the coordinator. And so many times, so we are spending more time trying to explain things because we do not have a good referral to, that we can explain the process. And sometimes we feel like we are really bordering on, where do we stop giving information where they really need to speak to an attorney. But so many people feel like they cannot afford an attorney just for simple things. And so by not really having a free legal clinic, I mean, even the state of Wisconsin, there's some referrals and stuff, but people have come back and they say they still want money. They'll answer minimal questions. And then in addition to that, since we don't have a free legal clinic here in Richland County really anymore, we are very, very short on attorneys in this county. We've had many, I could list 5 attorneys that have retired recently in the last 5 years. And so I really strongly feel like we need to recruit some attorneys, even for the judge to have court commissioners in her absence that can have bail hearings and mental emergency detention hearings and temporary physical custody hearings on children. We need court commissioners, which means we need attorneys in this town. And we don't have any many of them have retired. And so we're getting really, really short on attorneys. So if anyone has any influences on young people going to law school, but shout out to them. But it does affect our county. I just wanted you to be aware of that. And I guess that's pretty much it. I didn't have any reports because we didn't get any. Everyone in this building has been working on budget. So I didn't get my reports from Tammy and all of that because everything is progress. I have my budget meeting following this later this morning. So I have not yet met, but so hopefully next month I'll have more information.
Okay.
So I'm,
Sounds good.
my last comment is I'm still filled with optimism and frustration.
Yep. All right, district attorney.
Okay, so I will try to be brief, although I actually have a handout this time. Oh, boy. Sorry. So one thing about the security in the courtroom, I want to make sure everyone understands. We talk about it in these meetings. Judge talks about it. I talk about it. Clerk's office. Everyone talks about it. It's not really about us. We're just the mouthpiece here. We'll get the training. We'll have the U.S. Marshals come in. We'll do our active shooter and all that kind of stuff. I've got a victim who is a victim of sex assault, who's sitting in the courtroom because we have Marcy's Law in Chapter 950. She doesn't know how to get out of there. She doesn't know what is going to happen. She's not been in an active shooter drill in our courtroom. So we get all this training, hope to get more training, hope to get more safety. But, you know, I live on 14. I have defendants show up at my house. We have a safety plan at my house. Not so worried. If someone wants to get at me, they stop at my house on 14. So we talk about it, but it's not exactly just about us. It's about if there's a crime that happens in Richland County, if I have a victim of a sex assault that occurs here in Richland County, this is the only courthouse they can come to. They can't say, well, La Crosse is more secure or Sauk is more secure. I feel more safe going to the courthouse in La Crosse. They can't do that. And they are safer in La Crosse, perhaps, than here. So I just want everyone to know we're talking about it, but it's not just the courtroom personnel. And I think we just need to be mindful of that. Just a note about some ongoing good communication and cooperation between the departments. I found a problem Thursday, maybe a systemic problem. And how is this happening? I went to the jail, said, how do we get here? They told me, talk to Jen, talk to the judge, said, hey, the jail said it would really help a lot in the short run if we could do this. They said yes. We said we have a middle way of trying to ameliorate this problem. We're working on the middle way right now. We have a long-term way that we can address it, sent the information to the sheriff's department. It was actually a pretty easy, quick, but we had a lot of people to talk to, but everyone was available. Everyone was willing to talk with one another. Everyone was willing to take care of something which addressing it in the short run actually was very easy to do, but it was extremely important to do. And I think we are operating outside of statute and case law, no matter any way you slice it. Any way you slice it, I think, and it was systemic, not because of this judge. Sorry, Judge Sharp, you're killing us. Okay, so I actually have a handout, quick, I'm gonna give it to you. To my microphone. I had my budget meeting with our administrator and John and Derek yesterday. Yeah, oh, that'd be fantastic. Well, you can give them to our people with the little tiny computers, and then any other department heads in here. I never know who's going to come around, and everyone will be.
Will you email that to me so I can put it into the packet and put it online, because we have to do that for open record?
Yes, okay. So, and everyone can see how exciting my budget is. A very quick review. Once upon a time, the state, I mean, a long time ago, like 30 years ago, we had we had county by county prosecutors. We didn't have state prosecutors. Some people were getting paid nothing. Some attorneys were getting paid a lot. They had brain drain in the small counties because they're going to get paid more in large counties. Okay, so the state fixed that and made all the prosecutors state employees. I'm actually a state employee, but I'm contracted to the county. So I'm elected by the county, and I'm contracted by the state to work for the county. So much like the judges, state employee, but elected here, you end up being a contract employee with the state, essentially. But the negotiation was staff is going to be staff, paper clips, telephone, all those kind of things, and running the office. And I want to make sure that we understand, I have a law office. Everyone, I'm a department head, I'm this, that, or the other thing. I have a law office. I have a 2-attorney law office. You go across the street, you have a law office. You go to Baraboo, you have a law office. I have a law office. And it's a bit different to run a law office than a department. I'm not saying easier, I'm not saying harder, but we're never mindful that I have a law office, right? I don't work for the court. I don't work for whoever else. I work most closely with law enforcement, with people often forget. They think I work for the court or with the court, which God love you. I don't. I have a separate mission. Law enforcement has a separate mission sometimes than we do. In any event, so my budget is actually just a little over $500,000 to run my office. The county pays less than half of that. But no one sees that. No one gets to hear, hey, my office costs $500,000. And that's what you guys pay. And we get half of that back from the state, right? That sounds great when everyone says we get half of that money back from the state. You never get to hear half of the money comes back from the state because the state just pays it. So last year or this year, FY23, $504,000 to run my office. The budget for this year was FY23 was $220,000. So less than half to run my office. Within the budget for my office, so I did pass out or had passed out, or thank you for passing it out, the budget that I talked with Candace and John and Derek about yesterday. We always talk about, just for ease of reference, above the line and below the line. Above the line is that's the information that we get from the clerk's office. This is what it's going to cost for health insurance and this, that, and the other thing. So I can't really talk about, hey, can we adjust the money above the line? The only thing I have any control over is below the line. So the overall cost for running my office in FY23, $504,000. The budgeted amount to my office or for my office is $220,000 a year. My budget with just a 5% increase for next year, you can see, and all the other things that go along with that, all the information that came from Derek was $243,000 and a bit. And for 5% and the step is $247,000 and 224 cents. The thing that the only increase that I'm asking for in the below the line is $4,500. If you look at below the line, what I get for telephone transcripts, paper service, trial expenses, notary fees, postage, copier, office supplies, registration, last year was about $9,000. I'm running a law office on less than $1,000 a month, a 2-attorney law office. Everything below the line takes up, if you go with the 5% or the 5% plus the step, it's either 6.04% of my budget or 4.9. Let's average it out to 95% above the line, 5% below the line. Telephone transcripts, paper clips, all those kind of things only takes up 5% of my budget. So last year I had about $9,000 of below the line to buy paper clips and paper and postage and those kind of things. This year, the below the line increase is about $4,500. And I highlighted those. One of those is for transcripts. This last year, I budgeted $1,000 for transcripts. At this point in the year, at 50%, I was at $1,500 for transcripts. And I increased it by $2,000 to a total of $3,000 in my budget request. Why is that? I have 2 very litigious new lawyers who want to have motions on everything. And that's going to have an impact, although I think you'll end up making money off of those 2 attorneys. 25 cents a page for electronic documents. That sounds pretty good. But so when they order a transcript, I got to get a transcript. So I'm only reactive. They order one, I order one. The judge knows exactly who the 2 attorneys are. So they get transcripts, I got to get transcripts. So I increased that. There's an increase from $350 to $500 in my postage and envelopes. I am over half for my budgeted posted in envelopes, which was, I think, around $1,000 for this year, because cost of postage went up. Right? The cost of postage going up is going to bounce my budget. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I did not budget the increase in the cost of postage stamps last year. So the increase for $350 to $500 is because of the increase in postage. There's a $60 increase in registration. Then there is $750 for meals, lodging, and mileage. I don't send my staff to training. I give them the opportunity and I say, hey, here it is, you got to pay. You got to pay your own lodging, you got to pay your own mileage, you got to pay your own food. And I have a staff member who goes. She pays her own way because she thinks that's important. And I think that's garbage. I think that's 100% garbage that someone is getting training for their jobs, but they have to pay for it. So with the advent of Marcy's Law now and the restructuring of my office, we have more trainings to go to. And I am not going to have them pay their own way. I mean, can't have my people paying their own way. So I did ask for a whopping $750 for that. I did ask for $1,500 for new equipment. That's kind of a misnomer. It's really new software, but I have, 20 lines on my budget below the line. And what that is, it's redaction software. So any documents that we get, we have to take and provide in discovery, which is delineated in statute. We have to scrub it for everything related to the victims. Scrub it for everything, any personal information, and that's fine. And that sounds not that horrible until you get medical records. Stacks and stacks and stacks of medical records, which have to be scrubbed of everything, but not everything, but you have to go through the whole shoot and match. We simply can't go through, print them all out and hand redact. That's ridiculous. It's not a good use of monetary resources to print out hundreds of pages of medical records. It's not a good use of staff resources to be blacking out that someone takes this kind of medication or that kind of medication. So that's actually for software. I put it at $1,500. I looked at the other counties, got information for them, other counties who have 5 attorneys or less, 5 district attorney law offices with 5 attorneys or less. I think we got a handle on what kind that we want to use, but they're used in different ways in different offices. I think the cheapest is $100 per workstation that has it. The most expensive is $500 per workstation. We're going to have 3 workstations. I'm sending my victim witness coordinator to 2 other counties to see how it works. In process. So we don't just pick, hey, we want the $100 one because it's the cheapest. And I don't want to ask for another $1,200 for redaction software for victims and just buy it and then get it and say, this isn't really doing what we need it to do. So we're gonna have her go look. We did the top line, which is $500 a piece. It may be less than that, and it may not be next year. Quite frankly, at half a year, half through the year, my budget was at 40% of the budget. So I will have money without busting the bottom line, which is, that's the reality is that's what everyone looks at. What's the bottom line? Are you over it or under it? Line items, we might have questions about them, but the reality, no one really cares. Did you go over? Did you come under? So I'll be under, at least I suspect I'll be under so I can buy that software this year so I won't have to do it next year. So below the line, I asked for $4,500, everything, which takes up 5% of my budget. That's all I know.
All right.
That was pretty quick.
Thank you. Any questions for the district attorney? All right, that brings us to emergency management.
So basically, I want to just take my time with you this morning just to cover the budget meeting that I had with Administrator Pesh yesterday. And I want to echo the clerk's sentiment that it felt like more of a productive discussion rather than an inquisition and proving your value, which is super productive. And it's easier to comprehend challenges, when those challenges are being presented to you in a way that isn't demonstrating you have less value than something else, but here's the big picture and your piece of the puzzle is here and here. So I appreciated the change, and I hope that it continues that way. Two budgets that Emergency Management oversees is the local emergency planning committee budget. So in your folder, I provided you with the budget sheets that were given to Clerk Kalish and Administrator Pesh and John Hockemer. And then I just provided you with a copy of the summary sheet that I gave to them. Not much different in the summary sheet than it was last year. I did recommend to Administrator Pesh again this time, which was also last time, about somewhere having a non-lapsing fund for disaster response. And that can be monies at the end of the year from highway, emergency management, public health. I mean, all the entities that respond during a disaster, and even if it's just, you know, 500 or $1,000, that's more than what we have right now, which is this much. Looking at the revenues and expenditures for LEPC, the revenues are going to be up by $146.79, and I got the expenses to go down to $297.68 less than last year. There's no salary in there, it doesn't go towards salary, it's all just emergency planning and response to hazardous materials in the county. And the budget is under $25,000, I believe, overall. Emergency management, on the other hand, is a little bit different story. You're going to see that revenues are down by about $13,000, and that's because for the last couple of years, because of the pandemic, there's either been money infused into emergency management performance grant, which raised that up, and we changed our reporting. So we used to report our expenses on a kind of a fiscal year. So it was October 1st through September 30th. And the state changed how we report our activities and our expenditures last year to a calendar year. So the 2022 revenue was for 12 months of 2022 and 3 months for 2021, which kind of inflated that number. So when you look at that, it's going to look like, you know, you're $13,000 under. What we're actually getting is about $200 less than what we were getting pre-pandemic. So the expenses and the revenues aren't going to match. I just wanted to kind of explain that. We were given the option to provide a budget with a 5% increase and a 5% plus one step. The overall budget increase to emergency management with zero increase in salary is $3,500. So I presented all three. I presented zero increase to my salary. I presented the 5%, and I presented 5% in a step. The increases, that $3,500, the increases are $1,500 in utilities. It was added in the budget for this year, but somehow it got zeroed out. So we're paying utilities. Emergency management pays 10% of the utility cost for that building, which is a deal considering the ambulance service pays the other 90%, and tax levy dollars don't go towards the ambulance. $400 in heat, $782 in workman's comp insurance, which I have no control over, and $628 in truck expenses. So the only place that I can offer, and it's an offer and it's not, I said this yesterday, I'm not falling on my sword. I'm not trying to make any other department head look bad or anything, but I gave all three options. And if it's a zero increase to my salary and that helps the overall cause and we can start making things moving forward, great. And if it's 5%, great. I can't cut anything else out of the budget though, because that's just unrealistic. You're going to be doing appropriations to the fund if I do that. So I presented a realistic, all three options. I'm comfortable with all three options because I understand the numbers behind them. And my heart really is just to see us, let's just get out of this and get moving forward. There's some departments that really need to see an increase in their staff if they're going to maintain their staff. And there's some other departments that I think are working hard and trying to, you know, make it better for all of us. That's what my hope is anyway. So that's right. You can see the numbers in there, provided both budget sheets, revenues, and expenses in there. The other key thing is I just want to speak onto this, and I'm hoping this is the last year of my tenure in this position that I have to, I feel like I have to explain the benefit of the county having the ambulance service. The ambulance service doesn't absorb or take anything from the tax levy. It did for the building. And we recognize that that was a significant cost to the taxpayers. We also recognize that taxpayers stepped up in other ways too. You know, the REC board and the membership allowed for that building to be sold for $200,000 less. That was huge. And then we had a generous donation from Mr. Bob Simpson, which really made it work. So the building really was a community effort, and we certainly appreciate that. And we don't take that gift lightly. But the ambulance service doesn't cost county tax levy. It's no impact to the county tax levy. If you separate the services, this is my own opinion and there's the logic behind it, is you end up having to hire a full-time ambulance service director. The salary for that could range between $60,000 and $80,000, depending on what you wanted in that person, what level, license level.
In emergency management.
No, I'm talking about ambulance service.
Okay.
And if you split the positions and the county gets out for underneath the ambulance. So doesn't really have an impact on tax levy, but the townships and the villages and the city will pay. And that's your taxpayers fronting that burden. You'll have to have a full-time emergency manager because anybody that is in emergency management knows that there is no way you're going to do that job in this county, no matter how small it is, because of the impacts that we have with our beautiful terrain. I mean, I love it here, the valleys and the hills and all that. And this year, unfortunately, our farmers and producers are suffering from a drought, but we've had several years where we had so much water we didn't know what to do with it. So now you're going to have to pay that full-time salary. And again, you're going to be looking at probably in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $70,000. The ambulance service pays for 16 hours of my time. The emergency manager pays for 24 hours of my time. Splitting that, again, now you just created two full-time positions with an impact to your county tax levy and an impact to the municipalities who do pay to the ambulance service. So when I say tax levy, county tax levy, that's all I'm saying. But the townships are paying into this, and that's affecting their roads. So this, you know, there is an ultimate, you know, cost to the taxpayer at the end for the ambulance service. Some of the services that the county provides to the ambulance service, such as accounting, accounts receivables, and corporation counsel, and MIS services and such, that ambulance service would have to go out and absorb that. They probably have to find somebody to do their payroll, their accounting, a lawyer to be on standby for corp counsel. Those costs will fall on the taxpayer. And there's many times that the emergency management office, because the budget is so slim, relies on the ambulance service to support it. So if you look at my budget, $1,500 is in new equipment. New portable radio is $3,400. I can't even buy half of a portable radio if I needed to replace it. The ambulance service replaces it, and it's dual function. So there's many crossovers that at the end, it's the taxpayer. And one thing I hope that before I retire that I can see is that we talk about units of government, and I believe in home rule. Wisconsin is a home rule state, very strong home rule state, and I believe it's the way it needs to be. But what a county does will affect what a village does, will affect what a township does, and vice versa. Because it's the taxpayers that live here that are paying for all those units of government and all those services. So I did submit the ambulance service plan that was required by statute. I still have not heard back from one single county board supervisor. Did they look at it? Did they have questions? I shouldn't say that. I think I did hear back from one. But I'm just hoping that that discussion goes to rest and we can move forward with bigger things. That's my soapbox. I'm going to step off it, but I do appreciate this committee. You know, being on it has been big for me because I was a at a committee with 3 people, the county board chair, the vice chair, and 1 member. And if that 1 member was supportive and the county board chair and vice chair weren't, well, it never even got out of that committee and it never moved forward. So I do feel that all of you do listen, and you do try to understand. And I think you're just one voice too. So it's you and the rest of the supervisors. So, but coming from me, I do appreciate all of you as elected officials, this committee especially, because I do feel like we have an opportunity to share, and I don't think you've ever shut us down. You've listened, and I appreciate that. So, questions?
I have a couple questions. So what was the reaction of the county administrator on the idea for having some disaster funding set aside?
Yeah, she had a specific name for it, and Clerk Kalish was on board with it too, with the understanding that it might be small increments, but
I mean, anything is better than
Right,
zero, because we
but-
are one disaster away from blowing our budget completely.
yeah. So they both were very open, and John had supported it too. So
Okay. And did you bring up the idea of trying to add money into our, either the LEPC or whatever budget to try to implement some of our hazard mitigation? At all? I mean, was that conversation had at all as far as, I mean, I don't think that there's money, but again, if we don't start talking about that the need is out there, it'll never get in the budget.
yeah, we did talk about it, and it's in the budget summary as well. There was no money added to it, but there was discussion on like Pine River gauges. We don't have any river gauges on the Pine River at all. So I mean, it's literally yardsticks and rain gauges and kind of assess. We have some one elevation project we'd like to do. So it's just going to be more coordinating with the municipalities that are affected by it, and then just seeking grants. So, and grants, in my opinion, are good because it's our tax dollars coming back home, helping our people. So if we can secure them and bring it back, well, then our people get the benefit of it. That's how I look at it anyway. So
Have we heard anything back on the grant about
the radios?
the radios?
Yeah, we haven't got a turn down letter yet.
Okay,
So
we still think it's out there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And other turn down letters have gone out, so,
they will send out letters before they do any announcements to departments that did not meet the grant requirements. And then each Friday they start awarding.
okay,
So they'll award so many departments each year. So
okay. When do we
a
think,
month, I mean.
when do we think we'll know finally?
Oh, the awards can go all the way through till April of 24.
So if you recall, this is the grant that Darren wrote for all the municipalities who need new radios for our new system to be able to get grant funds for those. And how many of the municipalities or townships or whatever
Oh, the
ambulance
departments?
departments?
Yeah, Blue River Fire and EMS, Muscatine Fire EMS, Lone Rock Fire and EMS, Ithaca First Responders, Cass Fire and EMS, Richland Center Fire, 11, and Richland County Ambulance. So yeah, 11 departments responded and helped get the data together for it.
So hopefully we get that. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, that brings us to the PSAP and GIS grant monthly update. Who wants to talk about that?
So the quarterly report for the previous grant that we got was submitted on the 30th. I don't know why they picked a Sunday. So
Yeah, that's just bizarre.
yeah, I came in early and submitted it to them at 5:30 Monday morning, knowing that they're not going to be in there. They work at the state level. So yeah, he opened it up at 8 o'clock and said your report's received. The PSAP grant is moving forward. I think we're better than 50% on that. Not 100% sure, but probably 50% on the activities in there. The land information GIS grant, the piece of the project that Crossroads is doing for the mapping for Spillman. I think that's actually been ongoing for a little while now. So we have that, and Lieutenant Sis has reported, so I could put that in there, dispatch training. That'd be actually the PSAP grant, but We're working on the ESRI license, but we still have some of the other GIS work and a new computer for land information that we need to get kind of work through. We got till June 2024,
Okay.
but
But it's still moving forward.
yeah, June 2024, I'll be here before we know it.
Yeah.
And then the other grant, I'll just speak to that real quick. The other grant, the PSAP grant that went to county board last month, that was submitted the first. And it's $112,000, $112,800 some dollars. I had Sheriff Porter review it before I sent it, and I also went over it with Administrator Pesh before I submitted it. And it appeared that the 10% match, the sheriff felt comfortable in being able to cover that. What that will cover is a mobile unit for a dispatch position. And if I don't use the right terms, go ahead and fill in, but so they can, if they need to vacate the PSAP, they can. There's some ongoing support services that this grant is covering. And I think that was, goodness, probably in the neighborhood of $40,000. All of them combined. Vista and Spillman. And then dispatcher training again. So the GIS land information grant is due the 15th. And so I'm hoping that zoning administrator Bendel will be able to connect on Tuesday and have a conversation about that so that we can get the grant group together and get that grant submitted because, it's 11 days away. So
Fast. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your work on all those grants. Really appreciate it. All right. So that brings us to item number 13, approve monthly invoices and other sheriff department reports.
All right, so I did not include any of my budget stuff in the packet this time, but I will just kind of give a brief talk about that. And if anybody wants to see what I've done, what we've done for budget, I'm happy to share that with you.
I definitely do.
You looked at it?
No, I would like to see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. But just to kind of touch on what the budget looks like for 24, we followed the budget guidance with the 5+1 and just the 5% increase. So all that stuff is in there. Where our big increases are aside from that, I would say stem largely with, well, we have a couple positions that we included that were part of our 5-year financial plan. So there's that. But the rest of it is cost of running a jail, really, is the big chunk. One thing when we budget for jail expenses is we base it off of inmate population. Our inmate population has been much higher recently. We're back to pre-COVID numbers and above. Some of that is done by design by us accepting sanctions from probation and parole, which generates revenue. But we've even had to limit the amount we could do that because of what the population has been. Because I can't, in good faith, even though it generates revenue, take people from probation when I'm running out of beds. So, care of inmates, feeding inmates, all that stuff has been getting more expensive for us. Still on the same contract, it's just costing us more because we're feeding more people, we're treating more people, and it's more expensive. So we're increasing our budget to match those costs. And that's a good chunk outside of budget instructions in my financial plan that have increased the budget.
Can I just ask, you just said that you added 2 positions? Based on the 5-year financial plan, what 2 positions did you add?
So in that, jail administrator position, which, I mean, no surprise, I've been asking for it since I've been in administration now, and a patrol position. So the patrol position is half funded already by the Lone Rock contract. My hope would be that it would be fully funded with the approval of a grant, but I can't guarantee that that grant will come. But it is
You're talking
half.
about the COPS grant.
I'm talking about the Department of Justice COPS grant that we applied for.
And this is not creating a new position. This is filling a position that's been open since 2010 or something, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep. So that position's been open since 2010. I'm hoping we can fund it. The jail administrator position, and maybe you guys have heard me preach this before, our county's biggest liability is that jail. And it's not like, oh, Richland County, our jail is a huge liability. Nationwide, jails are government's biggest liability. The most dollars get paid out in settlements of things that happen in jails and local government. So that is our huge liability. We need somebody to help us run that more efficiently. That's why I want the jail administrator position. That's why I've been asking for it for so many years. It really is truly a specialized role that we need, and we're the only one in the state that doesn't have it. So both of those positions have been added into the budget.
What was the response from the administrator, Pesh?
So again, to everybody's point so far, the meeting, the budget process so far, I have nothing but compliments for. But that the jail administrator position was one position where I didn't get a no, but I didn't get a overwhelming.
I mean,
yes.
it's
It's a
huge increase.
Yep, it's a big increase.
How do we find money
Response
somewhere
was,
else? Yeah.
we really need to see how it fits into the big picture.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. So we'll see how things go moving forward from that, and maybe we can find some creative solutions to.
So overall, what percentage would you say your budget has increased then, since you have above the 5%, you have these other categories?
So, not exact, but roughly 8.9%.
8.9?
Yep. So it's probably less than that, because I think when we got the news about the insurance premiums, we just cut our insurance numbers in half. It's actually a little bit more than half.
Right.
So, so probably a little lower than that, but not much.
So last year, when we went through the referendum process, we came up with some cuts that we agreed to that we were going to do. So part of it was the savings from the jail meals, but we're not saving as much because we have more meals, right?
Correct.
So did you include any of the other cuts that we kind of agreed to as far as in the other line items, which I don't remember what they were exactly, whether it was training or, which I didn't, no, we
Nope,
said no to
we
training. Yeah.
didn't touch any of that. The only things that I cut from the financial plan, so there were some things that I thought were already cut from the 5-year financial plan that
That
when I
hasn't
got it,
been?
when I was asked to review it,
They were still in
they were
there.
still there.
So you did take those out then?
So
or-
yeah, there was a UTV. We were going to buy a UTV for enforcement. I took that out. We don't need that. We want that. And so I took that out. I placed something in its place, which was new patrol rifles. Our rifles are, I think they're over 20 years old now. I'd have to
We've
double
had
check.
that conversation
Yeah.
several times. in
And
the
so I
past, yeah.
took a little less than half of the money for the UTV to purchase rifles. John, this was before Candace was here, John came and met with me and said, hey, our capital borrowing's getting a little big right now. How do you feel about pushing that off? And I said, okay, we can swallow that. Let's push it off another year. So, and then there were some other things. I think there was a couple small things, and I mean small, that I didn't feel we needed as much money for as we had originally planned, and I cut those back a little.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But for the most part, the increases beyond the budget guidance and, and insurance and stuff like that, the increases are just the cost of doing business is going up.
Right. So one thing I would like for next month is if everyone could get us their budgets through June of this year, so we can just see where everyone's at for this whole, just kind of a halfway through the year kind of picture. So that'll be our kind of main thing we'll talk about with each department next month.
Yeah. So at June overall, we were right around that 50% mark. So
Okay.
based on the
On your
reports.
overall budget, you probably have certain lines that might be over.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Because
But
you know
what's your
there's
overall budget?
contracts and stuff that we've paid, so that line
Money
is
all comes out to
completely
front, right?
Yeah. So,
Right.
but we were right around that 50%. I could figure out an exact
Okay.
for the next meeting.
And how is the contract going with Lone Rock? How is that working out?
So it was a struggle at first, but we were upfront with the village and said it is going to be a struggle at first, and we weren't meeting our hours, and I told them we probably wouldn't. It was due to staffing levels. I believe, I haven't checked last week's numbers, but I believe that we hit them last week and the week before. So it's kind of trending where we're able to meet and hit the hours that we contracted for.
So if we don't meet the hours that they are contracted for, they don't pay as much as that?
Yep, I bill them.
Based
If
on
we
that.
don't meet the hours, I bill them for
Whatever
what we
appropriately
did.
you were, okay.
Yep.
Which that seems
So,
fair, okay.
Yeah,
And how is our staffing levels going?
we
Now-
are still short one jail.
Jail.
Yep. And we started testing last week. We just wrapped up testing this week.
Did we have applicants
What?
for? Which, are we boy or girl? Are we looking for male or female?
We're looking for a female.
Female?
We have one female applicant. So she looks promising. Like, so,
Oh,
yeah, I think she'll be all right. So,
so do we have to schedule an interview still? Because we haven't changed 89.7 yet.
yeah, we may need to schedule some interviews. We're working on getting that first round scheduled yet this week. Maybe not to do them, get them on the schedule this week. And then, I know we could probably email out like we
Yeah,
have in
I'm
the
gone the
past.
week of, I leave the 11th, I get back the 20th, so it may have to take place without me if you need to have it during that time. So, okay, do you want to go through your
Yeah.
your report then? Does
Uh,
anyone have any questions on the budget or concerns?
Two questions.
Sure.
I'm sorry. So I know that we make, the jail makes money on P&P holds,
Correct.
right?
Yes,
Some, enough.
some.
Okay, so I don't know if your department or P&P can find out what holds are not happening because of the size of the jail, so we can find out how much revenue we're not making. Right? So P&P, if they want to say, hey, we would have put 5 people in this weekend, but the jail is full, and we know the average is 3 to 5 days, we would at least know how much money, is being lost.
I mean, and that's a good point. And I think Aaron wants to talk to that, because
wanna lose money.
it wasn't just but 2 weeks ago that we were turning away. So,
He's good.
yeah, so we're turning away holds for low level things because we don't have the space for them, is
Right.
what Aaron was saying.
But you'd make this, so I read lips, he turned down 6 while you were out of the office for like a week.
Yeah.
So, and regardless of whether or not you're turning them away for a low level, which is better than a high level, but you would be getting the same amount of money if they were on hold.
Correct,
So we're losing money because of the size of the jail.
correct.
Okay. It'd be nice if we could figure that out, right? Because then we can tell the board, hey, look, we're losing a lot of money because this is a money bound system. And just for everyone's, I know you were talking about the liability here in the jail. We have an attorney who did get a judgment from the county on Dakota Juno, and he's teeing up another suit against the county because of the jail. So nothing to do with you, has to do with Matt Marshall. Nothing to do with you or anything else, but just so you know, I don't know how many lawsuits there have been against the county recently, but because of systemic things that I'm just letting you know that Jeremiah is looking to tune up another one. So it's a liability.
So I've been on this is my, I think, 6th year on this committee, and always before I remember our numbers being below 30, like 25, 26, as far as the number of inmates housed in county. So do you have are we just keeping more people? I mean, what exactly is happening that we have, an average of almost 15 more?
If I could put my finger on one particular thing, I don't know that I could. I think, as of lately, would you say that we're getting more sentences, more completions of cases and?
Well, I suppose the court has been playing catch up after COVID, but yeah.
I'm trying to be halfway compliant. I think, well, they get on EMP for the most part. They have Huber and the judge always says Huber. So EMP has been sort of the thing. The issue is when people are revoked off probation, there's a period of time where they just sit until they have their revocation hearing. They don't have Huber, they just sit. So as everyone's catching up, not just because of the judges, so is DOC. So we've got a lot of people who are just sitting waiting for sentencings after revocation. We have a couple of people right now who are on high cash bonds who are sitting. We have people on low cash bonds who refuse to pay to get out of the jail. And there are more sanctions that are happening, jail sanctions rather than revocations from probation. And with a sanction, you can sit somebody for 30 days, 60 days, that kind of thing. So it really doesn't have to do with book and releases. It really doesn't have anything to do with a jail sentence. Some ding dong picks up 30 days for doing something. It has to do with things that we don't really have any control over.
So I think, you know, one of the other things too is, you know, I have a younger, more aggressive department than we have in the past. And so we're making more arrests. We're out there, we're keeping busy. The other thing too is I think pre-COVID we were probably up in the mid to upper 20s for an average population. And right now, I guess I haven't run the numbers for the whole year, but we're probably in the low 30s. So, I mean, I don't know, percentage wise, I guess that's probably a decent jump, but
It's just interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say too, as far as the positions, I know there's the extra shared revenue that's supposed to go to like emergency personnel. So I know we're really was pushing hard for some of that money to go towards, you know, I think they're supposed to be geared towards like EMS and law enforcement and highway shop. So
There's a lot of strings attached to the shared revenue money,
Yeah,
and,
so-
and it is, you're correct. There are certain departments that are highlighted in that.
and that's what we're really was pushing for that administrative position with some of those funds.
Right. Okay.
So, but yeah, monthly report. So July, we had $50,598.47 in vouchers, 66 jail bookings. Average number of inmates housed, we're staying right at 39 there. Monthly complaints, 277 monthly complaints. Traffic citations issued, 68. Civil process served, 21. Transports for the month was 6, so we're quite a bit down from June. And average number on electronic monitoring is 8.
Did we not have a traffic grant this year?
We do.
That usually sees a bump.
I don't know, laugh about this. We had a guy that was on vacation for like a week or so in July that might
See
help.
why the numbers are different?
That might be why some of the numbers are down on citations. And monthly activity for dispatch, we had 558 calls for service, 95 calls for EMS, and 134 calls for the police department. If everybody wants to take a look at the bills, do we have any questions about the monthly bills?
Are you still bolding anything that goes over the line item? Okay, just wanted to make sure that we're still doing that. Does anyone have any questions on those? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the bills. Motion by Renish. Second by McKee. Any discussion on the bills or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, bills are approved. Is there anything else you wanted to add in your report there? Squad updates is lower, so. we'll
Yeah,
talk
no,
about that.
no, I think that's good for now.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to committee approval of MacTech invoices to be taken out of the jail assessment fund. I didn't see that in our folder. Oh, the contract, okay.
So we're looking to pay this out of jail assessment fund, and this actually came through while I was on vacation. But so the approximate or the cost for the project is $19,062 unless we pay it in a 5-year plan.
What is this for?
This is for our recording equipment for the phone calls, radio traffic.
Okay,
So that's it's for our higher ground server that records all that stuff. The support for it. Yeah.
okay, so this is a system we already have in place, and this is a maintenance contract?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So paying for it up front for 5 years is $14,620. So that would be the option that we would like to go with, is to pay
Instead
the
of
5.
making it over 5 years?
Yeah. Yep.
Where they probably put interest or some such thing on it.
So,
And you have this in your, it's in the fund. The fund can,
yep, the fund can
manage.
handle it.
Okay.
So
Committee, would someone like to take action? Motion to approve? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Why don't we go to item 16? I see that Mike, are you there? I don't know if you want to do Clay or Barb, do you want to start or do you want Mike to talk first about where we're at? Mike Day, are you on?
Yes. Am I coming through?
You are, yep. Why don't you go ahead and just give us a summary of where things are at? My understanding is we have not signed the DDR yet, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll get to that last year actually. Kind of an update. I guess starting out with the site acquisition process, and you know, I won't say we're gaining momentum because you know, the momentum I think is constant, but certainly I guess as you reach a certain point in these projects, you feel like the decisions are a little fewer or a little more streamlined towards one thing, and we're not continually looking at different sites and trying to remember what's going on there. So I think that's good news here. You start to feel like things are moving a little more quickly as we get into some of these basically standard processes, I guess. But on the site acquisition piece, I think we're really in good shape there with all of our letters of intent, which will you know, move us to ultimately move us to the having to get some contracts there eventually as we get the regulatory pieces more complete here. But that's really kind of wrapping up. I think the sheriff got the last one this week. One of the, I guess the big outstanding thing really in the site acquisition piece is, yeah, we have maintained our 9 sites and we haven't moved off of that for quite some time now. But the last thing that we're really trying to get pushed on and is still the U.S. Cellular piece of the process. And so we're again kind of assuming that all that's going to work its way out, but we're really trying to get a little more understanding there and assurances that it will work through. So, but yeah, that pretty much is the site acquisition process, which has given us the ability to do a lot more of the engineering piece, I guess, that I'll discuss next. You know, we're essentially needing to create drawings for all the 9 sites. We have 5 of those in hand, and we've reviewed, and some of those have even been updated. So we're in pretty good shape with drawings and understandings of the layouts and even some approval from the landowners. We hope to have 2 more next week as they're working through those, and then and also probably give them kind of an approval to begin working on the last 2 there. And so drawings kind of give us all something to look at and better understand what we're actually doing at the location. So that's in good shape. And then from there, once we kind of give the engineers the thumbs up, and the next step for us there is to actually do some survey work or have a survey team go out to the site. And so we've got 3 of those in the queue for next week. So we'll be having some survey work done, and then probably 3 to follow, and then I think they usually like to group them in groups of 3. So 3 kind of we've got probably 2 ready to go, but identify a 3rd, and then hopefully the last 2, and hopefully wrap up our survey work sometime this month, which will really give us the information, the detail to kind of reapply that to the site drawings and actually get a lot of the regulatory pieces started. Gives us the GPS coordinates of the tower, which is a big piece of getting all the applications via FAA and such to accomplish. So that's I guess engineering work, and along with that, we're trying to keep an eye on how these sites are designed and make sure we're being as efficient as possible. I'm doing some exploration in the backup generator space and the shelter space to see if we can't make sure we're streamlined and keep those civil costs, which we know have kind of risen from our original projections, in check as much as possible. So working on that piece of it as well. The last area, I guess, kind of circling back to the radio system and the DDR, and again, yes, we were able to complete the detailed design review process presentation from our vendor GenCom here this past month, and so we did have some questions arise in a couple of different spaces. Looking at the coverage maps, we had a couple of areas. One we identified as kind of Ithaca Valley, and not necessarily the on the street coverage there, but the in-building coverage along that road. And so I think we've come up with a pretty good solution there. Even though we set some of these tower locations, there's a little bit we can do with the location to maybe turn antenna patterns or other things to kind of move the signal around. So in looking at some of those parameters and actually looking at probably the best parameter there for Ithaca Valley, we were able to look up to the Keysville site and potentially raise that tower up a little bit to better provide coverage into the valley. And then also we did look at some antenna patterns that we think will give us better signal. So I think we feel pretty comfortable with that solution for that particular issue. The second coverage issue that we came out of the DDR presentation was the city limits of Boaz, and when we had to move away from our initial site, or we started looking at other options from our initial U.S. Cellular site, which really doesn't have the issue that we are talking about in the coverage of the city limits. When we looked at that alternate site, we kind of lost some of the signal because of the way the city is shadowed by the hills there. So really took a look at that, took a look at another greenfield site, or potentially we've discussed the possibility of being able to locate a tower on the same hill as U.S. Cellular, and of course we're still hopeful maybe that there's a discussion there with U.S. Cellular that would provide some options for us. But I think we have another location to consider. It shows pretty favorable in bringing back the coverage of the city limits. I think we've got a couple of solutions we'll probably be taking a close look at next week here, and deciding which can move forward with, or possibly knowing that we can move forward because the vendor's taken a look at it, and in reality for them, as far as let's say microwave connectivity or tower changes to the actual design, whether we use the existing alternate site, whether we use the U.S. Cellular location, or whether we use one of these potential new greenfield sites, it really doesn't affect the radio vendors' portion of it. Minor changes, you know, in any type of antenna coax or anything. So it really doesn't. They're basically assuring me that it doesn't bring in any big challenges to them putting their final touches on the DDR package. The last item, I guess, not related to coverage there that we kind of discussed with the DDR is an improvement to the or enhancement to the iFern design in the system. And so iFern is a channel that is used for interoperability communications. So those particular pieces and the final details and you know, kind of double checking the DDR package is being worked on right now. And I feel like, or at least in my discussions with GenCom, we feel like we can kind of finalize things for the county and get that DDR package ready for acceptance. Probably, I think I've got a goal of the 18th of this month. And of course, remember that when the county's ready to sign off on that, that just gives the vendor kind of permission to move forward and order some more pieces of equipment. And then, of course, is a milestone payment for the county as well. So, you know, a good thing to have. I think it's really, we've got a little bit of well, we certainly got potential risks with any of these sites, the greenfield sites per se, that we could come back with some regulatory challenges to whether or not we could site those at those locations. But I think we can address those. And again, I don't know if it really makes a huge impact to the radio vendors system design. So I'm feeling pretty confident that we should be able to move forward and kind of pass this milestone.
Mike, Mike, 1 second. Can you remind me how much is US Cellular asking to be on those sites, just to remind everyone of why we're not using US Cellular towers at this point?
Well, we had, I can't remember the number. I'm pretty close though, probably, but yeah, we've had the update at Muscadet, and they want to go from where we're paying a couple of $1,000s a year because we're adding dishes to that site. We've changed our antenna design to really match what we're doing today, which is a single radio system antenna. You know, most of our sites have 2 antennas, but we're able to change our antenna, and then adding the additional dishes to the tower, not taking any more ground space there because we already have ground space for the shelter. They want to go up to closer to about $10,000 a year on that site. So now on the Boaz site, conversations kind of fell off there because again, at that site, the county's not currently on the site at all. You know, initially when we showed them what we wanted there, we wanted 2 antennas, we wanted the 2 dishes, and of course we wanted ground space at the bottom of the tower for the shelter. And so they, again, were closer to almost the $50,000 a year range, which is what we had seen from other tower companies. And so there might be some discussion there to the effect that we obviously don't need the LMR, or we can survive with a single LMR antenna. And we have kind of shrunk the dishes, the impact of the dishes on the tower. But it feels like they kind of reached that number based on maybe the ground space, the additional need there. So again, I think it's a good conversation to have, but hopefully we can turn and get US Cellular's attention to the favorable relationship with the county because of the use of multiple sites, and then we could bring that one back into an option there. So,
and of course, the biggest hurdle we need to overcome is the one that's in Richland Center that's owned by US Cellular. well, it's owned by the city, but US Cellular, we still don't have any progress on that. Is that correct?
I guess I don't know that that's a hurdle today, but it could be a big hurdle a couple of years from now. Because right now, the existing documentation says our equipment goes on that tower.
And that
So-
contract, the current contract expires a couple years from now,
27, I think.
26.
26,
it expires, yeah.
unless the city renegotiates that contract now, which,
I don't really understand. Candace met with Ashley. I'll be honest. I didn't get a clear picture of that outcome. It sounded more like they talked about who Ashley was negotiating with more than the content that we had requested to be put in to be sent. So I
Okay.
don't know that they have seen our requests.
So the city received a draft proposal from.
of what we want to
from
put on that
Pyramid.
tower.
Well, yes, from us, but they
Yeah.
also received a draft proposal from Pyramid.
Which is US Cellular's broker,
Yeah.
basically.
And so we saw that, took that and said, okay, but this is what we want.
This is what we
Include-
need
This is what
included
we
in there.
need.
And it was from, I mean, it's the same language essentially as what we previously had, the previous agreement, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, go
Yeah,
ahead, Mike, sorry.
yeah. No, that was pretty much everything I had. Certainly take any questions, but yeah, I think the US Cellular piece, I've reached back to my contact at Pyramid, which again is the leasing company, because it sounded like the city of Richland was actually, or Richland Center, excuse me, was actually talking to a representative from Pyramid, probably not the contact that I'm talking to, but maybe her boss or someone up the ladder a little ways. So I reached back to them and I kind of implored them to give us a call, an opportunity to get on a phone call and if we can organize that, I think getting them, even if we can't get a US Cellular representative at that first call, maybe we can find out or let them know our concerns enough that they can engage somebody. But yeah, I would like to see us get on a call with them and have as many representatives from the county and even the city on that call, so that we can all just kind of
Put the pressure
talk
on.
through these things and hopefully implore them to take this to heart, that we need to kind of have some answers, so that we're not, I mean, it is impacting us a little bit, but not slowing our project down. I wouldn't say that at this time, but yeah, it could. So
Mike,
or it
where
could-
are we in the timeline? Are we behind schedule, ahead of schedule, where you thought we would be? Where are we at?
I would say we're on schedule. I think we certainly have some work that we need to get done here. The survey work, of course, our concern is going to have to be fall coming up, and so survey work and getting regulatory stuff that can work through the process. But we'll as far as engineering, one step will be, once we feel more most confident, is to have a boring company go out there and they'll take soil samples, so that way when we release our tower specs, that the vendors responding have a pretty good understanding of what kind of foundations they can put underneath these towers. So I'm not too concerned right now with that. I think we've got plenty of time there, but yeah, certainly that would be a big concern, is if that slipped too much. If we're still going back and forth and not telling the engineer that they can move forward, that's going to hold up them. And if we get an early frost or something, they basically, boring guys, they'll shut down when winter comes.
So
Unless it's real quiet winter.
before winter, our goal is what? Just have all the sites approved and figured out, and then construction would actually start in the spring, or what is our goal at this point?
At this point, my goal is to, yes, actually have the RFP or the bid specs out, actually identify and have a civil contractor because there's, you know, again, given the conditions and of course there's some challenges with some of our sites, but it's not uncommon for towers to be constructed in the middle of winter. You know, they can pour concrete and they can assemble towers. So I would hope that we still have both the bid specs or the bid response and the contract with the civil vendor this fall and then yeah, I could see them you know, finishing up some of their work and hopefully finishing up their work probably late first quarter next year, and then at that point, you know, the radio vendor comes in right behind them and starts hanging antennas on towers and installing equipment into the shelters. So
All right, so one last question. As far as our budget is concerned, I realize you still don't know because we don't have every site nailed down, but what is your gut feeling on where our budget is at? Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be cutting it close?
well, definitely I would put it in the cutting it close area right now. And again, it hasn't really changed that much from my opinion probably at last month's meeting, but certainly you know, the unknowns there. We're trying to take a hard look at a couple of the challenging builds just to make sure we're not spending too much money on, you know, constructing a road or something, or that, you know, we have the best solution there. And then again, I'm trying to look at, you know, how we can rein in as much as possible these larger expenses like the generator, the shelters, and so that we're not having a vendor respond to something that has just a solution that's more elaborate than what we need. So got exploring a couple of new ideas and stuff with a shelter manufacturer, and so yeah, that could impact the budget. But yeah, realizing that it's getting up there and we want to kind of back it down as much as we can.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mike? Go ahead.
Mike, I might be naive about this contract business, but it seems to me that we keep hearing from you that everything's looking good, everything's going to be great next month or next week, and it doesn't seem like there's been that much progress. Are you expecting this progress to finally come to a head pretty soon, or?
Yeah, as I stated in the beginning there, I mean, certainly you don't see in these projects, you don't see a lot of activity until you get to this point. There's a lot of planning and there's a lot of, you know, negotiations to work out with landowners. And so kind of like building a house, I think there's a lot of design time. And so it does seem like that you don't feel like anything's getting done. But ultimately, when you get past that phase, and you really get a contractor, I mean, they literally build, you know, towers, you know, 1 week to the next, and you know, can even set a couple of towers in a week. And so you see a lot more progress, tangible things that you can kind of understand, things getting completed. So yeah, I understand it probably doesn't look like much is getting accomplished, but we certainly I think have fewer questions or have more poignant questions about specific items rather than a lot of questions about a bunch of different locations going on right now. So pretty confident that we're moving along fairly well here.
Well, I have built houses and I have worked with contracts, and the longer it takes, the more it costs. And I just don't get from you the impression that time is of the essence. Am I being too optimistic here to expect more to be done faster?
I don't know if that's being optimistic. I mean, I certainly would like to have things done faster as well. And so trying to lean into that everywhere I can. And so, yeah, I would like to have it, have completed a lot more of these, steps, but, I guess, you know, the slowdown with US Cellular, I think is probably the one item that I think just leaves a lot of things in question. And I don't know, it's kind of unique in the sense that the county had the contract that they have, and that it's, you know, that we're now dealing with a tower lease company or a siding company, but every project has some things that are unique. So I'm trying to push as hard as I can, and I will certainly keep at it. And so, but I'm pretty comfortable with the way things are moving.
Barb, did you have anything you wanted to add as far as where things are at, or Clay? Any comments you need to make?
No, I think we're still moving forward on the jail project as well at the same time as this. With the cameras and the locks, they sent out another request for meetings, so we'll be working on that with some changes. So there's just a lot of moving pieces to this. And it does look like not a lot of movement. We meet every week.
Just gonna remind everyone
and-
that you meet every week and
And we do send daily emails and ideas. It's just, it is a lot of work, and it doesn't move fast.
okay. All right, does anyone else have any other questions or comments? All right. So how is everyone feeling about tackling 89.7 after 2.5 hours? I mean, I think, you know, Partners for Prevention was really important. I wanted to make sure that they had time, and, you know, and I didn't want to feel like rushing anybody. So, I mean, it's not like it's something that has to be done. So I'm okay with pushing it down the road a little further if everyone else, unless you really want to tackle it. Do we need a motion, or can we just skip it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You almost might want to think about, maybe we could have a separate meeting and just talk about
We
it.
could actually do that. That might be more efficient. I did send everything to Corporation Counsel, and he agreed that the items that I found that looked like they were mistakes were indeed mistakes. And so his recommendation, we have two options. We can just modify the one that we have, or we can just essentially take all these changes that we want to do and just make a new ordinance that would be, and that's probably the easiest way to do. Like, so we'll incorporate the things that we want to keep and then get rid of what we don't, and add what we need to add, or whatever. So I think that's probably the route that we will take. So that would bring us to mapping radio system and squad updates. So I do have a question about squads, just a general question. So do you think that, I think that our current plan is that we will, no matter what the mileage looks like on any of our squads or whatever, that we will continually do 2 cars a year, even if it looks like we have a full, you know, like we have 14 vehicles with very few miles on it. Like, at what point, everyone having their own vehicle, would we maybe not get 2 new ones every year?
So I think, you know, and I guess I haven't thought about this in great detail recently, but I think if we drop below that 2 cars a year, we're just gonna slowly get back into, like, if we went to 1 a year, we're gonna slowly get back into the position.
Right,
where-
but what if we did 2 and then 1 and then 2 and then 1? Because what I'm thinking is, you know, 1 squad car could do all of these things that we want done, like a bunch of these things that we want done in the courtroom, you know, so I'm trying to like figure
Well,
out, is it?
And so, yeah, so I guess I look at it as one of the things that I've been thinking about is do we put a mileage restriction on? Do we say when we hit X
This many miles and it's done,
then it's
yeah.
gonna be done? Or do we put a year restriction? Because there's a lot of departments that have if it is hitting or approaching 100,000 miles, it's gone.
Right.
Which we have never done here. I mean, we've run cars to 200,000+ miles here, and
Yeah, I know.
and that I hope we never go back to that, but.
No, and I agree with you. I don't ever want to get into the situation we were when I got on the board, which was we had all of our cars were ridiculously high miles, and we hadn't been buying cars like we should. But now I feel like maybe we're getting to that point where we could compromise maybe a little,
And then the other thing too is, we're with that, and I almost think you said a year on it because we're also updating the equipment when we replace the cars and, technology, what is 6-year-old technology anymore? It's considerably
ancient,
outdated.
prehistoric. Yeah.
So,
Just so stupid in a
yeah,
way.
yeah. And in those days when we were turning over cars every couple of years, you just kept the old equipment because it was only a couple of years old. But then we kept doing that until it was 12 years old and way outdated. So I think it's probably a bigger discussion to have, and I'm happy to sit down.
Just brainstorming ideas
Yeah.
of, I want to meet your needs and I don't want to get in a situation where we kick ourselves, but is there room for us to negotiate a little?
And then the other thing too that I've been thinking is we've been giving our cars to other departments, and I'm happy to keep doing that. But I think to some vehicles, like our admin vehicles, like they're probably worth something in trade-in. And is that cost
Greater than just giving
greater
the
than
car
just
to
giving it
someone
to another
else?
department? Or so I think there's a lot we need to look at this now that we're where we're at and things are in better shape. I think we do need to take a good hard look at how we maintain this going forward. So,
And making sure we maintain
yes.
while still
Yeah.
maybe helping out other places. Okay. Does anyone else have questions on mileage or anything like that? Okay, go ahead.
Squad 18 had a significant increase in miles this month. What was that for?
I mean, let's see what's.
7,600 miles that squad went in 1 month.
Squad
What was-
18?
Yeah.
That might just
That's
be,
the plate number. The increase is only 2,000
No, from
miles.
July, if you go down 6.
Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong.
July,
Yeah, you're right.
60,913, and now it's 68,519.
that may have just been a typo. I could go back and look, and I'm guessing that's not 8,000 miles. It's probably only 3. Our average is about 3,000 miles, so.
Two, because that's what squad 8 now I noticed has been pretty steady, and all of a sudden it had about 3,500 miles put on it in a month. The other ones were kind of keeping around that 215 to 2.
All depends on if they have to make trips up to Winnebago and back too. If someone doing transport, you're gonna put some.
Oh, we use our squads for transports?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I thought we used the van for transport.
If they're on duty, then they take their own squad cars up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it matters. It's one vehicle versus another, but
We try to leave the van available for,
Transports for
our transport deputies where or if we have a difficult person, whether it be, they're just a hard person to handle or their size or a disability or something like that, we try to keep the van available. But most of the time, if it's an on-duty deputy doing the transport, they just take their own car.
okay.
Yep.
That makes more
One
sense.
thing to mention about the squad car, squad 18 also had a fuel pump go out this last week. So that was something to fill backs. It was a $1,500 repair. So squad 18's kind of been the lemon squad. That's the one that we had issues with right away too. At what was it, 2,300 miles?
Which, is this one of the Dodge Durangos?
It's really the only Durango that we've had much trouble with. And then we haven't had a ton, but it's just seems to be the one that
If it's
has
gonna have
trouble.
a problem,
Yeah.
But 8,000 miles on a month, you'd ought to have something wrong with it.
Well, that mileage too that I put in here, it's also based on what they put into at the pump. Because now they do the quick trip thing, and I just go through their quick trip pump and whatever the mileage you put in. So if they accidentally put the wrong number in, that's what I'm gonna put in here too. So it could be either my mistake or it could be them putting the wrong mileage at the pump.
they just have to punch it into the keypad.
Darren's got a question.
Right.
Sorry, I lost my place, so we're talking really loud.
Here you go. I can't hear you online. It's online.
So I certainly appreciate Sheriff Porter passing a squad down to emergency management. You'd mentioned like admin cars. Do you get rid of them with less miles?
So my truck is still relatively new and it's pretty low mileage. The other admin cars, so then that's, I think, part of the discussion is what do you look at? Do you look at age or do you look at mileage? Because like Aaron's squad is a 2018, relatively low mileage, but it's gonna start getting up there in years. And so I just, that discussion to find what's the balance gonna be. We could let them run out, like I say, we let them run out 6 years, and if they're low mileage, let's see what we can get for them, right? Or we can just keep putting the miles on and let the years go up, and but I think we need to have that discussion to find out what that balance is gonna be.
So one of the discussions that I had with Commissioner Elder was the emergency management truck is 20 years old, and it's got the notorious 6-liter Ford diesel in it. So, it gets to the point where how much more money do we want to put into it? But so the discussion we came up with, and I was able to purchasing a new emergency management truck out of the capital improvement plan was he or the superintendent's truck would not get pounded to the ground. That would go to emergency management. I could extend the life on that truck for 10, 12 years, saving taxpayer dollars, not having to buy an EM truck. So I was wondering, maybe that's the same thing, because the squad that I got from you hit 190,000. It was in the 180s when I got it. And it's going to start needing some work. So, maybe that's, and I don't disagree with you. I think you might be able to get a little bit more on auction, but if there's still an opportunity to look at the department before it goes and just say, because I could take your admin car and stretch that life out for a long time too.
Yeah, and so, and I'm certainly still in favor of doing that. I think that's worked out well. I guess what my thoughts were is like, what's the cost benefit of, if, and it's say not even auction. Let's say I go to Philbeck and say I'm getting a new admin vehicle for myself. Here's mine. What will you give us for it? What will you give the county for it? And then reduce that from what we're paying for the new one. Is, trade-in value being what it is a lot of times, is that cost effective, or is it more cost effective to pass it on to another department and let them run it out for another 4 or 5 years? And, or do I just keep it and run it for another 4 or 5 years?
Right. Yeah, I think looking at auctions, because I watch the auctions all the time for different things, and some squads like your 18, 19 with the miles, looking at that would probably get you 6, 7,000. So 6 or 7,000, you sell 3 of them, that's $20,000 towards going back into your car fund. So I think that opportunity would be there for you. Just curious about the discussion of what I had with Commissioner Elder about if you're looking at admin car replacement, passing that down to a department that would use it regularly, but doesn't, can extend the life out even farther without putting them, like for the highway, what they're doing with it, you could give them a car with 150 or 1,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
Or anyways, thanks.
So, yeah, and like I said, I'm not against that. And I mean, there probably is certainly a value in keeping that in the county, as opposed to now I get a new vehicle and you need a new vehicle, and now we've bought 2 brand new vehicles, right? When we could have passed one down. So
there's value in the auction too.
Yeah. I also think that, if you have your newer cars that have higher mileage, those ones could be passed on, like you said, to you guys in the highway shop. And, every 2 years, you guys get a new one. But if you have like an older, administration type vehicle that has low mileage, is really old, then I think those ones might be the one options.
It seems like, to me, it feels like having some kind of policy for you, like the guidance that you guys take all these factors into consideration and come up with a policy that you think makes sense. Like you will check what they're going for at auction, or and then weigh it against whatever. But whatever procedure you come up with it, and just to have that, and that way it's just then we know what we're going to do, and all the departments would know what you're going to do and what's available and what's going to happen.
A fleet plan would be huge, and you could do that countywide.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe that's something the county administrator could be put on her radar.
Yeah.
And I think right now the standing order is it has to be offered up to other departments first.
It is, because I think that's in our board rules or something
Yeah.
about that.
And I don't know that we ever did that with vehicles before until recently.
When we actually started reading the board rules.
Yeah. So,
Oh, we did all the policy
Yeah.
with Clint, yeah.
but, and I
Okay.
have a couple vehicles that are gonna become available again. Like you said, that one hit 190,000, so maybe we have something that'll work for you again.
But you could get one that's only at 157.
I was thankful, grateful to you.
Right.
You know, because it saved the department some money.
Yeah.
You know, it really has.
You have to purchase a new vehicle. That would totally blow your budget.
Right, yeah, well, we couldn't do it. This allows for that, so.
Right. Okay,
I have a question.
yes.
On, I was talking with my brother, when we get new cars and they're spec'd out, because I'm talking about what happened on the two new ones that didn't have AC in the back or something, we're having to add AC after the fact. Kind of what happened there. Could
So
you elaborate on that?
I don't know that we had any issues with the new ones. The only ones that we,
Or is this one that you're retrofitting?
Are you talking about the K-9 vehicle that has to have
Yeah.
specialized stuff in it?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's because it's,
so
And it didn't,
It's-
and it didn't come with it? You're
no,
getting prices right now to have it put in?
not us, but there is a spec where like, if you know it's gonna be a K-9 car, they
Yeah.
have dual control climate, right? So you can control the kennel separately from the, you don't have to have that. It's very helpful because then you don't freeze yourself up the front when you're trying to freeze the dog in the back. Well, not freeze, but keep
Cool
the
the
dog
dog,
cool. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I wonder who, 'cause he
That
said
was
there,
a
he said there was a, no, just recently, he's getting a price together right now for upgrading for a K9.
is that the city? Maybe?
Maybe is the city getting a second dog?
No, no.
No, and
Did
when
we have to do something to the second for a new dog
No.
one?
And when we plan on, I mean, right now is the plan is when Rambo retires and we get another dog, we're gonna continue Mike's squad as the K-9 car for the new person until that one's taken out of service. So, yeah, we haven't,
I'll recheck with him because
unless it was another county. It could have been another county. Is it,
I would think he would notice that on the side of the car, but yeah, you never know.
yeah.
All right, anything with mapping? I think we kind of covered that with the GIS stuff, but. All right, so that brings us to future agenda items. The only thing that I have is that our inspection report did have some deadlines for reporting back to if you fixed a few things. The jail inspection report. It had some July, August. I think I might have changed them to September because I just gave you the jail inspection report back because I forgot to finish it. So if you want to take a look at I just sent it to you, I think, a month ago.
Okay, yeah, I remember getting.
Yeah, so if you want to look at that, there's some items there, and I think you probably have addressed most of them, but you should take a look at that and then just plan on reporting back to us and put that on the agenda for next time to report back. Those things.
Just so you know, too, the next jail inspection's already been scheduled, so
When is that?
September 27th.
I believe so. I was gonna try to find the email here.
Yeah.
Well, then you want to make sure they're done before that anyway.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
September 27th at 9 a.m.
okay. All right. That's the only thing. Does anyone else have future agenda items? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Reddish, second by McKee. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Oh, I have one question. Dave, you're the vice chair for this committee, is that correct? Or Bob is? Okay. I will not be at the October meeting. So I just need to make sure that our vice chair will be able to take that meeting. We can talk about it next time. All right. Thanks, everyone.